All right, can you guys hear me? Awesome. I'm gonna give it just another couple minutes. I think there's only, how many people have logged in here? 17, and we had 100 and over 120 registered. So I think we can give it a couple minutes before I get started, just to make sure everyone um, can join. And also, if you do have to hop off early, that's okay. You'll get a recording, but hopefully you can stay for the whole time. So I'll start at like 4:32. I'll just give it a little bit more time. Anyone else want to let us know where you're joining from and if you're applying this coming cycle? If you can remember to mute, it would be great. So there will be time at the end for question and answer. So I'll try and keep an eye on the chat throughout, but we will have time for Q&A at the end. So also, if you have questions that are kind of more specific to yourself, it would be great if we could try and keep this session more general, so the questions will apply to everyone. But if you have a situation you wanted to talk to me about after class, you can schedule a call with me by going to my profile, which there will be QR codes that you can scan to go to my profile. Wichita, oops, and playing this cycle, California, awesome. 29 people. All right, we'll just get started. If people join late, they can get the link. So today we are going to talk about something super important with regards to law school applications, and that is writing those essays. I really think it's pretty much the most important aspect of the essay, because it's the one thing you have complete control over. So my name's Indrani. I have been with Leland for about 2.5 years. I think some of you have been to some of my classes already. And I worked at Stanford Law School in the admissions office before becoming a professional coach. And I've been doing professional coaching now for quite some time, both through Leland and through other companies. But this year, I'm just on my own through Leland. So I am happy to work with any of you that needs help with I do comprehensive stuff, everything from, figuring out who to write letters of recommendation, putting together the school list, optimizing your resume. I have essay only packages and also comprehensive packages that do everything for the whole year. So right now I'm signing up people to work with me from starting now through pretty much a whole year. I'll be their partner through the whole thing, from the time they start brainstorming essays and all the way through when they're hearing their outcomes next spring, and helping them make decisions and negotiate scholarships, and what to do when they're on the wait list. So it's pretty much an all-inclusive thing. So happy to do. I have capacity still, so I'm happy to help anyone who needs help. The QR code that's showing up on the screen, if you scan that, you'll go straight to my profile and see how you can schedule time with me. Okay, so today we are going to cover everything you need to know to put your best foot forward through your essays. And as I said a minute ago, I really think the admissions essays are pretty much the most important aspect of your admissions application. Everything else is almost like a historical document. So you have your resume, which documents what's happened in your work. You have your letters of rec, which is talking about, prior transactions that people have had with you or interactions. You have your GPA, which is what it is, your LSAT score, which once you take it, it's pretty static. And then you have your essays, and your essays, it's just like a blank slate. So you can You can write whatever you want, and it's super important to kind of optimize what you say, figure out what your message is. And so we're going to talk about how to go about that. The other thing is every essay prompt for each school is totally different. It's not like the Common App for undergrad where you have one prompt that you can just use for all your schools. Every single school asks their questions in a different way. And it's important to really read those prompts and not make any assumptions. And they're all nuanced. And so we're going to go over kind of analyzing some prompts and figuring out what they're asking for. I also recommend that everyone that works with me has 2 essays, not just 1. So the essays will be 2 pages double spaced, which is the lowest common denominator. Most schools ask for 2 pages double spaced. Some schools, they say you can do longer, like up to 4 pages. I think Chicago doesn't even say how long. But speaking from experience, admissions committee members don't want to read 4-page long essays. They have so many to read. And if Stanford and Harvard, they say, you can write your story in 2 pages, it's good enough for every other school, I think. So just try and hone it down to 2 pages double spaced, and you're going to have 2 flavors of essays. And if you have these 2 flavors, these 2 kind of themes, you'll be able to answer everyone's prompts. And also there will be ways that you can plug in both essays through the optional other required prompts. And that way you're kind of giving them the whole picture. So the professional essay is what I call it. The schools don't call it professional essay. They usually just call it a statement of purpose, statement of perspective, personal statement. But if you're talking about your background, either educational background or work history, and then what's inspiring you to go to law school, why you need a law degree to reach your goals, and then if they ask why you're applying to that specific school, that's a professional essay. The personal essay is a wide open prompt that's basically asking you to tell them something about yourself that they wouldn't otherwise know without looking at, if they could look at your whole application besides the essay, there's another story you can tell that will kind of paint the full picture for them. And this one is usually a little bit harder for people to write because it's so wide open and there is no right or wrong answer. And we'll talk about some of the essays that I've read over the years that were my favorites. Those essays don't even tie back into law school or why they need a JD. It's literally a personal story that will imply all sorts of great attributes about them. The optional essays, almost every school has optional essays. I believe that they are truly optional, except for one exception, and we'll go over that. And then why essays, that's the essay where, for instance, UCLA specifically asks, why do you like UCLA? So that's the why, we just call them why essays. So you're gonna be talking about that specific school. And we'll go over all of these things. Okay. So as I said, for those of you who have joined a little bit later, I will have time for questions at the end of this. And so if you can hold on to your questions, that would be great. It's hard for me to kind of keep track of the chat while I'm talking. And also, if you wouldn't mind trying to keep the questions more broad, if you have specific questions that relate to your own situation, we can talk about them offline if you want to schedule a call with me. All right. So I pulled some sample required essay prompts from some schools. This was this last cycle. So Georgetown Law does not have a minimum or maximum length for the personal statement, though we recommend about around 2 pages double spaced. So there's the 2 pages double spaced. And because they recommend it, I think they're kind of saying that's what they want. You can write your personal statement on any subject that will enable the admissions committee to get to know you. So wide open, doesn't even say, give you any hint of what they want. NYU, this is a brief statement, make it no more than 500 words. It is also personal. Describe aspects about yourself, your accomplishments, or your academic and professional goals. Take a moment to reflect on these and consider including your thoughts about how they motivate you towards graduate study and/or illuminate the reasons you're applying for one of our programs or a particular specialization. So it's kind of like a mix of what I was talking about, personal and professional, but they are asking specifically for why you want to study law. USC. The personal statement is your primary opportunity to discuss who you are beyond the application basics. We're particularly interested in how your background, academic or otherwise, has led to your decision to study law. This is not the place to repeat items on your resume. We'll go into that a little bit more. Um, it's a kind of a pitfall people fall into. They when they're regurgitating their resume, and we'll talk about how to avoid that. University of Chicago. The personal statement is an essential part of every application, and it's your opportunity to introduce yourself to the admissions committee. It should demonstrate your contribution to the law school community beyond academics, and should demonstrate your ability to communicate your thoughts effectively. The admissions committee often finds that a personal statement focusing on a unique personal attribute or experience is usually the most informative, as opposed to a restatement of your qualifications or resume. So there's another hint. They don't want you to regurgitate that resume. Fordham. While the topic of this required essay is up to you, the most successful personal statements are those that develop a sense of the applicant and their values, aspirations, and concerns. As Fordham Law School's motto is in the service of others, we're also interested in hearing about contributions you would like to make to our student body, the legal profession, and ultimately the larger society. So they're giving you some hints. UCLA. Discuss any matters relevant to your ability to succeed in law school and the practice of law, and any attributes, experiences, or interests that would enable you to make a distinctive contribution to UCLA law or the legal profession. They're getting pretty specific. Okay, so I mentioned the professional essay. Again, no school's going to call it a professional essay, but it's the one where you're talking about why you want to be a lawyer, why you need a law degree to get there, to do whatever it is that you want to do, and what your background is and your qualifications. It's very easy to kind of fall into that trap where you're just kind of taking your resume and writing paragraphs like in prose, and that's a huge mistake. Um, so the purpose of this is to convince the admissions committee that you deserve a seat in their class. Lots of people at your stage of the game may not know exactly what kind of lawyer they want to be or who they want to help with a law degree, and that's totally fine. But for this moment in time, you should pretend. You should have kind of a narrative that makes sense with your background, or some inspiration you can talk about of why you want to help a certain population of people or do a certain thing, why you need a law degree to do it. I have read a lot of essays that sound a little bit less sure. And if you think of the whole process of admissions committees reading these essays, it's very comparative. So if they have one person with, X LSAT and X GPA who writes an essay that says, I need a law degree to help this population of people that are marginalized, and it really is my passion, and look at all these great things I've done, and I want to do more, and I can only do more with a law degree from your school. Compared to someone with the same stats who's saying, everyone's always told me I should be a lawyer because I am a critical problem solver and a good writer, but I'm not really sure what kind of law I want to study. I'm going to go to law school to figure it out, and I will just explore. That exploration is not what they're looking for, or not what they won't choose you, basically. They're going to choose the person that sounds very convicted about what they want to do. Now, it's okay if you change your mind. No one's ever going to read these essays again once you submit them. And they understand that, sometimes people have a thought of which way they're going to go, and then they take a class. Let's say they think they want to go into immigration, but then they take a environmental law class, and that totally changes their trajectory. Totally fine. But at the moment that you are applying, you should have a straight story of like why you specifically need a seat in their class. I can't say it enough that rehashing your resume is really a waste of time and energy. They will have your resume. So if you're just listing off things you did in your different jobs, it's super boring. and it's not really giving them any more information than your resume. So it's kind of a waste. And um, I really, I encourage you to really flesh out your resume enough that you don't have to talk too much about the nitty gritty of the jobs you've done. That way, you can pick out an experience or two from your work or school or whatever that is much more of like a story. So, for example, a person you met at work, or a project you did in school, and something that really kind of like lit a fire in you to go help. That is much more interesting than talking about each job you did, and the reports you did and the presentations you did. You can put all of that in your resume, and then pick one or two experiences from that stuff that you did on your resume to really go into a story that implies all these great attributes about your work ethic and your critical problem solving and your leadership and whatever else it is that you really need to tell them about you, so that they can kind of picture you at their school. It also is much more memorable. I remember being in these meetings and talking about applicants, and it's like, oh yeah, isn't that the woman who XYZ? You can remember some example from these essays, and it's, we all could talk about that person because we remembered the impact the essay made on us. It's really important that you make the adcoms care about what you care about. So, you don't have to teach them something new, but if your passion and your inspiration comes through, it really is memorable. Okay, the personal statement. This is the one where there really isn't a any sort of prompt. So for the professional, as I read in those essay prompts, it's kind of saying, why do you want a law degree, and why do you want to go to our law school, and what is it about you that will make a good lawyer, and you talk about your potential. Um, the personal essay is totally wide open. The topic doesn't matter. And you shouldn't force yourself to tie it back to law. You should just talk about something that's happened to you, a moment of personal growth, maybe a time you changed your mind about something, a challenge that you've overcome, and kind of reverse engineer it. So think about the attributes that you find are your strengths. If you think of, what would your best friend say about you, or your boss, what would your boss say are your best strengths? If you think about those things and then you try and think about a story that demonstrates them through the way you tell the story, it's a win. And the goal of the personal essay is that the adcoms will basically read the essay and go, I want this guy in my class. He seems like a leader and a mentor and just a all around good person. And I can picture him in my classroom walking the halls and making a contribution to the law school community. So the topic doesn't matter, as I said. Just pick something that you feel inspired about. Sometimes people start writing this essay, they think they have a great idea, and then they kind of write a paragraph and feel stuck. It might be the wrong topic, and that's perfectly fine. Don't force yourself if you have a total writer's block. Um, and then some pitfalls for this one. I have had to kind of discourage people from talking about mental health or trauma too much. I think it can work, but you want to make sure that you're not kind of putting implied risk into your application package. So if you talk a lot about mental health or trauma, you have to make sure you come out stronger in the end. You don't want the adcom to kind of go, "Ooh, I hope that this person will thrive. I'm not sure that they have figured out their stuff." If that is what happens at the end of the essay, then it's pretty clear that you might not get in. They want people who they want people who will succeed. So there are ways of doing it. I help people do it if that's what they want to write about, but it's a little tricky. So I definitely recommend, if that's your topic, that you work with someone who knows what they're doing to try and make sure that you're not implying any undue risk into your application. I have examples of, I mean, people, right? I've been doing this for a long time, and it's like an infinite um, pool of different topics. So I had a guy write about ballroom dancing, and that was super interesting because he was also a football player. And he wrote how ballroom dancing taught him to be a more mindful person and a better friend, and just kind of a better person altogether. He was a better conversationalist because he was in the moment. He noticed that once he started being more mindful, how many things he was missing on his daily walk. And because he wasn't paying attention to what was going around him. He was thinking, "What's for dinner?" or "What's on my grocery list?" I had a person who wrote about rescuing a horse, and the horse ran away from the barn, and how she had to kind of talk the horse back into the barn. I have people write about cooking or a different hobby. I've had people write about their athletics and overcoming an injury. It really runs the gamut. So the most important thing is that as the story is being told, the reader will learn attributes about you, like you're empathic, you are resilient, you are a critical problem solver, a good communicator, a good friend, you have great leadership skills. Whatever it is that you bring to the table is what you should demonstrate through this story. Okay. Oh, someone's asking a question. Hold on. Let me look. Oops. Could you perhaps expand on what you mean by not tying this essay into aspirations for law? Isn't the personal statement meant to provide your origin story of sorts that explain why you chose to pursue a career in law? So this is what I was saying about there's two different essay flavors. What I call the personal statement is not what it's what I was just talking about, where you talk about kind of your own personal attributes. What you're talking about is the professional statement. And I'm not sure if you joined a little bit later, but I went through some essay prompts, and we're going to look at the essay prompts again at the end. So, depending on how the school words their prompt, they're asking for what you're talking about, why you want a law degree, and what you're going to do with it, as opposed to the personal prompt, which is kind of wide open, and they're not asking you for that. They're kind of taking it for granted that your resume and maybe some other optional essays will have that information, and you can tell the personal story. But as I was saying earlier, there are ways of making sure that you can plug both of these essays into a prompt. So either it's optional prompt, another required prompt, a supplemental essay. And for most schools, I've found you can find ways to use your professional essay, which is the one that talks about why you want a law degree, and your personal essay, which is the one that talks about your own, attributes or how you solve a problem or a moment of personal growth. And that way you have contributed everything you can about yourself, both on the professional side, why you want a law degree, and the personal side. I hope that helped, Ariana. Um, so could you expand on how to create a wow factor? Okay, so I think this is another pitfall, trying to make sure you stand out and have a wow. I don't think you need to think of it that way. I think if you prove to them that you have overcome a challenge, and you tell it in such a way that the adcoms really get to know you as a human being through the story, that's the wow factor. I don't think you need to, save someone's life in your story, or, cure cancer. You just have to be authentic and be yourself, and everyone has a unique story, and I think that's your job. You tell your unique story. I don't want people to go into this thing, how am I going to make myself stand out, because then we get into territory that just doesn't seem genuine. Okay. Okay, so yes, the personal statement sounds like a diversity statement. Yes, and they can double. Some schools are not asking for diversity statements anymore. The whole thing with the Supreme Court has like kind of made that fall apart. But yeah, definitely if there's a diversity aspect to your profile, write a diversity statement. Diversity has so many broad meanings now. Um, and so yes, it's definitely personal slash diversity versus professional. But the diversity statement also usually I recommend doesn't tie back to law. The law, what, the professional statement will tie back to law. And if there's a extra prompt for a diversity prompt, the personal statement should work. Okay. Any more questions? Oh, not sure if it's a personal factor, but would it be considered not good to talk about your experiences as a neurodivergent person for the personal? I think that's a great topic for a diversity statement. Um, Again, as long as if you can show how you cope and how you have worked through challenges, and thrived and succeeded, I think that's an excellent topic. Talia, did I answer your question okay about the diversity statement? Awesome. Okay, optional essays. Almost every school has at least one optional essay. And some schools have five, and some schools say pick one of five, and other schools say you can write up to five. My recommendation is that you consider optional essays as truly optional. You will not be dinged if you don't answer all of the optional essays. If there's I think Georgetown has, 6, and, I usually recommend my people write 1 or 2. If they are very inspired to write more and, it's just flowing out of them and they're excited to do it, that's totally fine, but don't feel forced into it if it's not feeling natural. Georgetown has an optional essay like, "Give us your top 10 list," which is kind of a fun one. And then some of the schools have optional essays. Tell us about a time you disagreed with someone. How did you handle the conversation? Um, so if you are really inspired to write an optional essay and you feel like it's going to add some new and different information, go for it. But don't feel obligated. I've read some optional essays which feel very kind of forced and halted, and it's not adding value to the profile. It's actually kind of taking away. Um, so truly they're optional. The only one that I feel like isn't optional is when a school says, "Why do you like our school?" So why do you want to attend our school? And that's the why essay. And I would recommend you, if they give you the opportunity to tell them why they're so great, I think you should definitely take them up on that. Um, okay. The why essays. So many schools ask for the why essay. Sometimes it's optional, sometimes it's required, and sometimes it's actually embedded in their essay prompt. So at the end of the essay prompt, usually it's a prompt that's asking for the quote professional essay. At the end, it says, and how you will contribute to our community, or how you will, or why you like our school, and what is it about it that you like, blah, blah, blah. So that it's nice because if you write a professional statement without the why, and then a prompt asks the why, you can tack on a paragraph at the end that addresses the last part of the prompt as a why essay. Other times it's a separate optional or required essay. So you can kind of figure out your strategy. And that's one of the things I work with people on is figuring out, looking at all the required, optional, supplements, all the essay prompts, figuring out how to best optimize how you're going to answer them. For example, if a school has a professional essay prompt that's asking why you need a law degree to reach your goals, and an optional why essay prompt, then you don't have to force yourself to add the why essay to the bottom of your main essay and get too long. You can do it separate. However, if a school asks for the why essay in the essay prompt and they allow for, if they say it's about 2 pages, you don't have to squeeze down your professional essay shorter to add the why essay. So you can kind of like, I do this whole exercise with my clients of looking at all the essay prompts and figuring out the best way to answer each of them. It can be a little nuanced, and especially if you're applying to 12 schools and you have 12 main essays and then maybe like 5 other required essays and all these optional. It can feel a little bit overwhelming, and so it's nice to be able to kind of pick them apart, analyze what they're looking for, and making a strategy. So for when you're writing a why essay, I think one um, pitfall is that people kind of make it super generic, and then it could be talking about any school. So I've read so many why essays where it says, I want to go to Stanford because of the world renowned faculty and the amazing students and the great weather. I'm just making stuff up. But if you could swap Stanford in for Berkeley or UCLA, you're not doing a good job writing that essay. It should really be specific. So for that, you need to do some research. Um, the admissions website should be the start. Also look at the current student website. If you can get in there, really look at the curriculum. You can see if there's, abroad opportunities, externships, what clinics they have, and be very specific. If, you can look for TEDx talks by a professor, talk about a specific professor who is aligned with your research goals or, what you want to do with your life. Talk to alums. You can go visit the school if you have the resources. But another idea is to network. So if you go onto LinkedIn and you join the alumni network of your college, you can do research into, alums from your college who have gone to whatever schools you're applying to, and then reach out. And the fact that you already have something in common shouldn't be too intimidating. You can reach out to them and say, hey, I went to UCLA also, or I am a UCLA student. I'm applying to Fordham Law. I see you went there, and I'm wondering if you have a moment to answer a couple questions. And you can ask questions that are kind of beyond what the admissions website has listed there, and you can find out some kind of nuggets that maybe you can add to your essay that makes it a little bit different than everyone else. And this is important. If you can't think of anything to say about why you're applying, why are you applying to that school? And if a school doesn't ask why you're applying to that school, they don't care. You don't have to force yourself to answer that. Is it a myth to do as many optional essays as an application asks for to show more interest to a school's admissions? Yes, I strongly believe that's a myth. Um, I don't think you should force yourself to answer every single optional prompt, because then it gets super long for one thing. I mean, if you think about the adcoms and how many of these essays they have to read, it gets pretty tedious. And so unless you have something really exciting to say, I wouldn't force yourself to say it. So I do think it's a myth. I mean, okay, I'm gonna make a caveat. If there's five optional essay prompts, I would say do one or two. But what I'm trying to say is you don't have to do them all. But if you do zero, then it seems like maybe you're lazy. Does that answer your question, Talia? Awesome. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to loop back to the essay prompts that we went through before, and I've underlined some of the cues and clues that tell you what they're looking for. Georgetown Law does not have a minimum or maximum length for the personal statement, though we recommend around 2 pages double spaced. You can write your personal statement on any subject that will enable the admissions committee to get to know you. That looks like a diversity/personal statement to me. They're not asking why you want to go to law school at all. NYU. This is a brief statement. Make it no more than 500 words. It is also personal. Describe aspects about yourself, your accomplishments, or your academic and professional goals. Take a moment to reflect on these and consider including your thoughts about how they motivate you towards graduate study and/or illuminate the reasons you are applying for one of our programs or a particular specialization. So this one is the underline shows they're kind of asking for a professional statement, and this is where it makes sense to kind of look at um, all the other prompts that they have, because you could use a professional one here, but if there's a prompt that asks for more professional stuff, you could maybe do a personal one here and the professional one for a different prompt. USC. The personal statement is your primary opportunity to discuss who you are beyond the application basics. We're particularly interested in how your background, academic or otherwise, has led to your decision to study law. This is not the place to repeat items on your resume. So they're specifically saying how your background, academic or otherwise, has led you to the decision to study law. So they're asking for that professional flavor statement, but not just repeat items on the resume. So I was talking about earlier, you want to flesh out your resume enough that you can pick one or two things from your background and go in depth into them. University of Chicago. The personal statement is an essential part of every application and it's your opportunity to introduce yourself to the admissions committee. It should demonstrate your contribution to the law school community beyond academics and should demonstrate your ability to communicate your thoughts effectively. The admissions committee often finds that a personal statement focusing on a unique personal attribute or experience is usually the most informative as opposed to a restatement of your qualifications or resume. This is a personal statement. They're saying we want to know something else about you besides your professional aspirations. Fordham. While the topic of this required essay is up to you, the most successful personal statements are those that develop a sense of the applicant and their values, aspirations, and concerns. As Fordham Law School's motto is in the service of others, we're also interested in hearing about contributions you would like to make to our student body, the legal profession, and ultimately the larger society. They are asking for a professional flavored statement. Marina asks, are these the same prompts we will see if we apply this fall? These are the prompts from this cycle. The prompts don't change too much. However, with this administration and all the chaos that's happening with schools in general and DEI stuff, I'm not sure if they will be changing the essays. It's hard to know. Right now, the applications are they're closing for a while. Some are still opened, but you might have to just wait and see. However, they usually, even when the Supreme Court made their ruling about affirmative action, there were some changes to the prompts, but mostly it was adding another required essay. It wasn't like changing the ones that existed. So, but I think my key point though is regardless of how the prompt is worded, if you have this, one professional flavored essay and one diversity slash personal essay, you're in good shape. You can pretty much answer any prompt that comes your way. I don't think is it Yakima? I don't think you need to delay your drafting if you think of it as those two flavors, because you will be able to use those two essays regardless of how they put the prompt in. So I think you should be fine. I think if you were only writing one or the other, then you might have to delay to see, what else is going on. But I have found over the years that if you write one professional flavored essay and one personal flavored essay, you're in really good shape. Oops, sorry. Uh-oh, what happened? What is happening? I don't know where my thing went. That's so weird. I'm so sorry. Sorry, guys. What is happening? It disappeared. Apologies. Okay, can you see it again? Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, yay, we're back. Sorry about that. I clicked something inadvertently. Okay, bonus tips. The majority of schools have a 2-page double-spaced limit. That's the lowest common denominator, so you should shoot for that length even if they allow for longer. And one thing that the question I get a lot is, what is the AdCom looking for? And I think that's the wrong approach, because if you go in trying to write what you think they're looking for, it's not going to be authentic. The people on the admissions committee, they go in with an open mind, an open heart. They're just waiting to see what you have to offer them. So you can decide how to go about it. You can decide the topic. And I truly believe everyone has a unique story that they can tell in a really authentic and engaging way. And so that's your job. Don't think about how you can make them happy. Just think about your story and, if you're writing the professional statement, why you want a law degree. And if you're writing a personal statement, you're going to just demonstrate who you are as a human being. So now it is time for Q&A. If you guys have questions, I we have about 20 minutes. I don't think you'll have 20 minutes worth of questions, but I'm here for 20 more minutes if you want. So just you can chat them. You can just put them in the chat box here, and I'm happy to answer whatever you've got. So this is my QR code to my profile, and I have essay packages for which basically is everything from brainstorming. I have some brainstorm documents, and you can decide whether you want to work on one, two, or three essays with me. We'll have a 30-minute call, brainstorm together, go back and forth with essays. And usually 5 reviews is plenty. 5 reviews on my part. But it's flexible. If you need more than that, that's totally fine. And yeah, most people, it's amazing when I get a first draft of an essay to see how it ends up at the end. It's usually a totally different thing, but in your voice. And I'm also, my superpower is cutting things back to 2 pages without ruining them. And actually, it's weird, but I really like doing that part. So, if you end up with a 2.5 page essay that you really like, I can help you get it down to 2. How far in advance do you think we should start brainstorming and writing if you want to apply early fall? So, Daria, it's hard for me to know because I, I think it depends. I think it doesn't hurt to start brainstorming now, but people start writing. I have some people that have already started writing, but if you're studying for the LSAT still, let's say you're studying for June, it's perfectly fine to start writing after you take that test. Are there topics considered too personal or we may want to steer clear of? So it's kind of up to you. If you're comfortable divulging personal stuff, it's totally fine. But I think, as I said earlier, unless you missed it, there's ways of doing it smartly. So if you divulge, I mean, I have had people write about trauma and overcoming trauma, or mental health situations, and they got into great schools, but I think the most important part was we made sure that they come out stronger in the end, and that at the end of the story, the admissions committee will have no doubt that everything's okay now and that these things won't affect them in law school. Oh yeah, and you can ask me questions about stuff other than essays. I'm here. I've been doing this for a long time, so happy to answer questions that don't have anything to do with essays. Um, does failing 2 classes or classes in general hinder chances of admissions to T14? Um, Sorry, I always say it depends. I don't think it would hinder. I mean, if your overall GPA is decent and you have a great LSAT score, I think there's something to be said about the balancing act between grades and LSAT. So if you have some issues with your transcript, but you have an excellent LSAT, I've had people. I actually helped someone get into UVA last year who had a 2.6 GPA, but he had a 170 LSAT. So it can help offset. Also, if you have kind of some sort of explanation for failing those classes, there is a spot where you can write an addendum to explain what happened, and that can also help. I think it's really important to do those addenda. If there's anything in your profile, it could be failing grades or withdrawals on your transcript, or one particular quarter that is a dip and then you go back up. It could be a gap in your resume, um, that you write a short paragraph describing what was going on and basically convincing them that everything's handled and you're fine. Suppose you're applying to a law school that has a 25th percentile GPA of 3.85. It would obviously be necessary to submit a GPA related addendum if you have a 3.7. Under what GPA would you advise students consider submitting a GPA addendum? So, I mean, if you have mostly A's and a few B's, I actually don't think the addendum, you have to kind of have a reason for writing an addendum. A 3.7 is a really good GPA. Um, I mean, so here, okay, let me describe it in a different way. Usually the people that write addenda have a specific, like, I learned my parents were getting a divorce, and I went home for a little bit, and it was really traumatic, and I withdrew from my classes so I could go help the family, and then I came back and everything was fine. Or I was really sick for a quarter, or I broke a bone, or something that's very specific that you can describe that explains why you have whatever GPA you have, or if there was like a bad quarter or semester. But if you're kind of, all A's with little B's sprinkling around here and there, I'm not sure what you would write. Um, I mean, I would definitely that would be something I would brainstorm with you, but if there's not really any, like, specific reason for the grades that you got, it doesn't really make sense to write an addendum, and I actually think sometimes people write addenda and they call attention to something that isn't, um, it's not a thing. So, then if you call attention to something that's negative that the adcoms didn't even think about, then you're pretty much doing yourself a disservice. What if your school for undergrad has a pass fail system? Would it be good to try to work harder towards a stronger application? I mean, my general advice is always work towards the strongest application that you have. If you have a pass fail system for all classes, I would try and get really good letters of recommendation, because when there's grades on a transcript, it's kind of like an easy way to assess your academic skills. If you have all pass fail, it's harder, so the letters of rec can help. And I might even get more than 2 letters of rec so that you have kind of a broad range of recs. For personal essays, do you recommend sticking to one central story? I have ideas on multiple topics I could write about, but I'm wondering if you think that writing about a few different experiences in the essay is too much, makes the essay less impactful. It gets scattered. I mean, it's a 2-page essay, so I don't know. It's really hard to talk about more than one topic in a 2-page essay. You can divide them into two and do a professional and a personal one with two different topics, but the adcoms will get it. I mean, this is how it works. It's a short essay. They don't need to hear about everything that you've ever done. I think you should just pick your favorite thing and talk about that. How do outcomes see applicants who have been out of school for a while? Should you proactively address it? You don't have to proactively address it. I think the professional statement, if you have a gap, will probably address it in itself, but you don't have to like explain why you didn't apply to law school earlier. In the old days, I think it was much more common for people to apply right out of school, but now a gap year, 2, 3, even 5. I have someone who been out of school for 10 years applying right now, and it's perfectly fine. You don't have to. It just makes you kind of non-traditional, but it's not something that's going to hurt you. Do graduate school GPAs have any impact in the admissions process? So not really. I mean, it's a thing. Grad school is easier than undergrad in a lot of ways. I think one thing is you go to grad school and like every class that you're taking is really interesting for the most part. I think that has something to do with it. But most people I know have much higher GPAs in grad school than they did in undergrad. And but having a grad degree is just another thing in your profile. So it's not it's neutral or good, but not, I mean, it's not gonna your grad school GPA isn't gonna offset your undergrad GPA is what I'm trying to say. Will schools notice the trend in grades you got on your transcript, or do they just look at the GPA? Oh no, they definitely look at the whole thing. They look at trends. And so they'll see if you have I remember looking at transcripts and going, it's like 3.9, 3.9, 4 point, I mean 2.3, 3.9, 3.9. It's like, what happened? What is that 2.3 doing? And then if there is no explanation, we just kind of scratch our heads. But if you put an explanation there, then that's explaining something that we don't have to guess about. How do you know when an addendum will do more harm than good? I withdrew from 2 classes my spring semester of senior year due to mental health, but I came out with straight A's in the classes I stayed in. Would it be better not to write an addendum in that case and act as if nothing happened? No, I think a short addendum, I think that so addenda should be short. I've helped with addenda that are like 4 sentences long. And you don't want to kind of go on and make it into a whole essay in itself. I think that you can. definitely write an addendum about that. I think, like, I could help you with that, making sure that it, comes out that you've handled it. I think that's the key point. If you're gonna write an addendum about something that was, obstructing your GPAs or making it hard for you to study or something, you have to make sure that the adcoms don't think it could happen again, because law school is hard and they don't wanna admit people that have a hard time. Have you seen essays where a student will talk about one type of legal career short term and another long term? How do you suggest writing a wry essay that focuses on more than one type of law? I would just pick one. It's a short essay. It's it yeah, I would just pick one. I think it's important just to like, because even if you say you have two different interests, um, it can look a little bit like you're not really sure what you want to do, and it's much better to look like show that you really know what you want to do. So I would just pick one. Could having work experience for the discipline of law you would like to work in be positive impacts on the admissions? Yeah. So, I mean, if you have a narrative where it's like, I took these classes in undergrad and I volunteered in this organization helping a certain population, and then I got a job or an internship helping this population again, and this is the law I want to do. I think it all kind of helps with that trajectory story. So yeah, I mean, I usually try and figure out, it all has to make sense. You don't want to contradict yourself. So, but people do pivot also. So I've had people who were working in one field and then something inspired them to drop what they were doing and go to law school. That's also another, interesting, and it's talking about a trajectory, but it's like a pivot. And that works too. So I don't think it's hard. There's no right or wrong answers here. And I think that's why it makes sense to start early to really brainstorm and figure out what that story is that you want to tell. We have about 5 more minutes. Ah, sorry, I didn't scroll down. Thinking about my writing my personal statement, I'm realizing it is based on my experience in school. However, should I just decentralize my personal essay from school and think broader? You don't have to. I mean, some people are still in school and they don't really have anything else to say. So if your experience in school is what inspired you to go to law school, then that's what you should focus on. If your experience after school or a combination of the two, you can figure out how to tell that story. I don't think, yeah, it depends. But yeah, it's hard for me, so kind of hard for me to answer some of these questions because I haven't seen or talked to you, or I don't know you, but I envision that it can work. In the why essays, do you advise against mentioning specific faculty? No. I think you should, one piece of advice is try and find out. Yeah, it's true they sometimes leave, and that's actually one of the things I recommend when you're putting together your school list. If you have a faculty member that is aligned with your goals and has the same similar interests, you can find out if that person is near retirement or going on sabbatical. And I actually, if you're applying to a school because of specific faculty and you get there and that faculty member isn't there for the whole first year, that's pretty disappointing. That's all public information, so you can definitely look into that. So I would look into that before you mention a faculty member. We're earning a master's degree, like a master's in public policy. How can we use that to our advantage to write an essay? Well, if the master's in public policy is going to help inform what you do with your law degree, then you can write about what inspired you to get a master's in policy, and perhaps when you're getting your master's, you realize that a law degree would be a great complement to that. So that can totally work. I've been out of school for almost 6 years. I can get letters from two professors. Would it be best to get a professional letter as well? If so, would getting a letter from a superior or peer be better? The peer knows me better. That's a really good question. Two professors, that's awesome if you can get two professors after 6 years. That's actually pretty rare. I would get a professional letter since you've been out of school for so long. And you should pick people who know you best. So the title doesn't matter. It's who can really talk about, deeper things than just at work, like you were punctual and you're a nice person. They should be able to talk about, your problem solving, collaboration, And when you're asking people to write your letters of recommendation, one of the things I recommend is you don't just ask them to write it, you provide as much information as you can to make it as easy as possible so that they don't struggle with trying to write it. If they're having a hard time thinking of what to write, they might put it aside and procrastinate. But if you make it super easy for them, then they get it done. How would you navigate obtaining professor letters of recommendation after you've graduated? Just ask them. I mean, if they're still at the school, then you should just send them an email or call the office. I basically think so. A lot of people feel intimidated or nervous to ask people to write a letter, especially if they've been out of school for a while. But it's kind of no harm, no foul. If you ask and they're like, "I don't really remember you that well," okay, so they're not going to write it. Or if they say they don't feel comfortable writing it, at least you asked. You'd be surprised how many professors will say yes. So just ask them, um, and follow up and remind them of things, a paper or project, that kind of thing, so that their memory is refreshed. But I would just go for it. Similar to the question above, I've been out of school for 2 years. However, most of my time in undergrad was spent virtual. Would it be okay if I got recommendations from workplaces instead of solely professors? Yes, I would write an addendum of that most of your time in undergrad was virtual and that it was really hard to get to know professors. You're in the same boat as a lot of people, but I would definitely write an addendum so that they aren't wondering why you didn't get a academic letter. Anything else? We have a few more minutes. Another question. Focus on one type of law instead of two in the essay. My resume has experiences very grounded in both different types of law. Should I mention why briefly in any written application material? Omit more details from the type of law I want to pursue less on my resume, or not mention it at all in any component of the app other than my resume? You don't have to talk about everything. I mean, it's just you don't have room. So I would leave it in the resume, write something else write about the other thing in the essay. Maybe if you get an interview, they might ask you about it or you can talk about it, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. Is 4 recommendation letters okay or too much? So it can be too much, but one thing that you should note is if you are waitlisted, and almost everyone on the planet is waitlisted somewhere, a lot of times the schools say you can provide a new letter of rec. So if you have 4 in the LSAC system and you use 3 up front, you can provide the new one when you're waitlisted. So it's kind of nice. And your letter writers won't know that you didn't use it up front. So they won't know anything. They'll just know that they uploaded their letter and that they're going to assume that you used it, but you can use a 4th one later. Okay, I think so, guys. I hope that was helpful. I am. I have capacity. I'm happy to talk with you. If you want to sign up for a 15-minute call, we can do a little brainstorming, whatever. I have coaching packages open right now, either the comprehensive or the essay only. I can make a custom package for you, or you can hire me for like an hour or two to do whatever you want. And you know what would really help me out if you did enjoy this class and you think it was helpful? When you sign out of here, it'll ask you for a thumbs up or thumbs down. And if you give a thumbs up, you can give a review. And if you give me 5 stars, that would really help me. I would really appreciate it. So I hope I get to meet some of you later, and good luck with everything. And I'm around, so definitely come and contact me. Have a good night.